Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of DV Live City Talk. I am Amanda Acom, the marketing coordinator at Desert Valleys Federal Credit Union. Before we get in today, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss a conversation, and be sure to share this episode with everybody, as I've seen a lot of questions floating around on social media. We're going to get some answers today. Hello.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Amanda?
I'm here. No, I am doing great. It's a nice day out today,
It's
so
beautiful.
I'm appreciative of that. And there's no baseball today. My son plays for the league, and of course it's nice and sunny and bright, and no baseball today.
Yeah.
So before we jump in, can you tell anyone watching who might not know you who you are, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself?
Okay. Well, my name's Mallory Boyd. I currently have a number of jobs. I volunteer at the number of places in Ridgecrest, but the job we're here to interview today is the one I have with the Water District. I'm the current president of the board of the Water District, Indian Wells Water District, Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Okay.
It was just talking before this video about my lifetime here. I was conceived in Ridgecrest, but not born here.
I know, saying born and raised, and you're like, well.
Sorta. My parents weren't real fond of the hospital staff that they had at the time in 1952, so they chose to drive out of town to Pasadena to have me, and then brought me back a couple of weeks old. So I'm not really a lifer, but pretty close.
Pretty close. I mean, I would say so. We'll give you the honorable mention. Is that it? Yeah, we'll give you that. So do you say you're a desert kid then, or a city kid?
No, I'm definitely a desert kid. I can survive in the cities, and I've lived in a few. When I worked for the Department of Defense with the Navy here, China Lake, I was on travel
all the time.
Almost all the time. It felt like a couple of weeks a month for many years, and those are all to the big cities. So, I got my dose of it, but then, come home, and it was always more relaxing to be, here in the high desert.
And find a parking spot easily.
Yeah, absolutely. The 5-minute commute to work, and, all those things.
I will say this morning, it took me about 8 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It was wild. I was like, what is happening? And it did also take me till I was like 23 to learn how to parallel park.
Well, yeah. There's not that many places here in town that you have to parallel park, is there? So.
No. So.
And you can just easily avoid them and park someplace else that doesn't require it. So.
Yeah, I can just go like one spot over and have to walk another like 6 steps. Right. So yes, today we are going to talk about rate structure for billing.
Okay.
And I'm kind of excited for this because I'll be honest, I usually just paid my bill. Just continued to pay it because you got to do that. And then there was all this buzz about rate structure and fees and this and that. And I was like, well, what is this? And thank you for coming on today and educating all of us.
Well, I hope I can clarify the water a little bit on this, so to speak.
Well, then let's dive right on in.
Okay.
Why did the board choose to adopt a new rate structure?
So every few years, this current rate last rate had been in place for about 3 years.
And that was the 4-tier structure?
That was our current 4-tier system, which has been pretty much the way we've had the water bills set up for quite some time. The 4 tiers has worked out pretty well. We'll talk a little bit in detail about why we felt we needed to change that this year in a moment. But the real reason we have these rate studies, we're a business. We've got since we're a public business, we have some constraints.
Okay.
We can't make money off of you. We're basically supposed to just provide water at the cost that it costs us to deliver it, which includes all of the infrastructure and the pipes and the electricity and the staff and all those things.
Everything it takes just to get water
to
your home.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, when you turn on the tap, then there's another.
Then it finally starts a whole nother one.
That's another commodity fee that starts to develop based on how much water you use.
Okay.
But all that stuff that leads up to the fact that there is water at your spigot is stuff that we need to pay for. And the prices to maintain that and to develop it and grow it are changing. And with this unprecedented inflation that we have right now,
yes,
it's making a big hit. And so there's no way we could continue charging the old rates under that new future state that we were experiencing. So
Okay.
it was timely. We're probably a little bit late. If we'd had this rate structure in place 6 months ago, it would have been better.
Okay.
Because we were starting to operate on a deficit mode.
Oh.
So, but we're back on track now. Everything's fine.
Okay. No chasing your tails.
No chasing the tail. So part of the, you mentioned Mr. Henderson in your question there, who did this study for us.
And he was from is it Hildebrand?
Hildebrand.
Hildebrand Consulting?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so Mark was, he's been a staff adjunct for years. He's been our advisor on rate structures in the past. We contacted him. We gave him all the data we had collected over the past few years, which included a capital investment plan, which was going to address some of the aging infrastructure that we have, some pipes and pumps and et cetera that need to be periodically upgraded. In addition, expansions. If you'll notice around town, we've got more people living up in College Heights now than we used to.
Yes.
And so we've had to put new tanks up there to supply water. So there's an expansion of the existing infrastructure, and there's a maintenance of the existing infrastructure that goes along with that.
Because I'm assuming it's easier to maintain than for a problem to happen and then having to fix it.
Yeah, you really want to head these things off. We pledge to be a reliable water supply for the valley, and to do that, we have to be proactive in making sure that we address problems in advance and not wait until they fail.
I guess it's kind of like your car. You want to do an oil change before it's all out, and then it leads to bigger problems.
Exactly. And some things you can't foresee. There are, just like, as your car example, there are some cars that develop a problem that you couldn't have anticipated or happens earlier than it should have. And we have those kinds of problems as well. But I digress a little bit, but all of those costs associated with those needs, plus inflationary effects on the staff salaries,
right.
You name it, right? Anything.
Gas for vehicles.
Absolutely. Maintenance
travel.
of gas vehicles. It is a small. It's a small business. Well, it's actually a medium-sized business, I guess, but it has all those aspects that you have to somehow account for, and those are dialed into our rates. So that during that discussion, as we were looking at the recommendations from Mark Hildebrand, we realized that we had gotten a little bit ambitious with our capital projects. We had 10 capital projects identified over, I think it was a 5-year period of time.
Okay.
But the ultimate cost of all those happening within that period was just excessive. Our rates would have been much higher than they are with the current approach.
Thank you for saving us some costs.
Well, so we asked our engineering team, Krieger and Stewart, what were the most important projects in that list of that 10, and they gave us the top 3, and we chose to focus on those 3 during this next rate period, which will last hopefully 3 years.
Okay.
And then we'll readdress the other projects in another rate study in the future, kind of spread things out so we're not impacting the community too harshly.
Now, are these all like third-party companies that come out?
There are a variety. We put out solicitations. We get responses. Some are repeat companies. Some are new companies.
That might help with the repeat companies knowing the area, the community, and the district itself.
Absolutely. And us, them, we know their reliability. For example, we just had a team, and I'm forgetting their name right now, that came out and did a repair on Inyukern Road. There was a leak on a pipe there, and they came out and gave us a contract, said it was going to take X number of weeks. Well, they got done almost 3 weeks in advance.
Oh.
And it was fantastic, right?
Yeah.
It's all good news.
That's always nice, right?
That kind of company track record is something you might want to go back and exercise again in the future.
Especially because most contracting jobs I know of go over or there's speed bumps in their way.
So I digressed a little bit on the why for the rate study. We have to reevaluate how much revenue we're bringing in
Okay.
based on how much expenses or how many expenses we project over the period of time of the rate structure.
So currently 3 years over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were looking at about 3 years. And the old rates were not sufficient to do that. So we had to make an adjustment. While we were making that adjustment, we realized that the groundwater extraction fee that was imposed on us during the previous rate, we'd already had the previous rate structure approved.
Okay.
And then we got straddled with a groundwater replenishment fee from the Groundwater Authority.
Right.
And we thought, well, how are we going to recover this? And so we just spread it kind of peanut butter style across all the customers. Got a piece of the action.
Yeah.
We figured, well, that's the most equitable way we could do that without having to run another request for a new rate study, which would complicate things. We could put this extra fee in. That fee goes directly to the Groundwater Authority. The water district gets none of that money.
Okay.
We just collect it because we've got all the addresses of the water users in the valley.
Middleman.
We're just a middleman. But when we looked at the new rate structure, we realized that the replenishment fee is assessed on only a portion of the water that we use at the water district.
Okay.
Initially, we had an allocation of 4,190 acre feet of water that we could use and distribute to our customers fee-free. But any water above that 4,190 acre feet of water, we would have this replenishment fee of $2,000, $2,100 an acre foot on top of that. So
I was going to say, how do you judge who's using that? What if I'm like just leaving my water on all night, running that water, but my next door neighbor has been gone for 2 weeks and hasn't touched anything?
Well, that's kind of complicated, right? It's I mean, he's benefiting from your water, or
I'm like,
maybe,
maybe
you're getting his trees watered with your water. Yeah. No, this is more about. This would be what water flows through your meter.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
It's a volumetric charge. So the more you use, the more of that Groundwater Authority replenishment fee you pay. So that's how it was.
Okay.
We decided that why should somebody who is using little water, they're not actually causing a need for extra water like that's subject to the fee.
Replenishment?
Right.
Okay.
So we came up with a different plan. We said, okay, let's take that amount of money or that amount of water that we have that's fee-free and distribute it evenly with all of our customers as a first step in their rate.
Okay.
And then anything above that will be subject to the replenishment fee. So if you can stay within that allocation, you won't pay the replenishment fee. So it turns out that all the Tier 1 users, and about 70, our best estimation right now is about 72% of our customers will be in Tier 1. So
of
they
the
won't,
new
yes,
only 2-tier structure.
right.
Okay.
So they will not be paying the replenishment fee. The heavy water users who will be in Tier 2 will be paying the replenishment fee. So that step should be making, roughly 3/4 of our customers happy that they're not having to pay that fee anymore.
Okay.
But having said that, at the same time, the costs of doing business have gone up. So you're still going to see
an influx.
You can still see the water is still kind of expensive, but it could have been much worse if we'd left the recovery for the replenishment fee set up the way we were doing it under the 4-tier system.
So will that area, like when I'm reading my bill, if I'm staying in Tier 1, is there a breakdown on there that shows like, okay, you use this much in Tier 1, and then say next month if I did go over, fill a pool, and it'll then show Tier 2 and replenishment?
You'll see
additional charges. I'm trying to remember what my bill looks like, guys.
The bill will have
I should have brought it.
It'll be similar to the bills that you've had in the past.
Okay.
Up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the commodity fee, which is basically the water. I use as much as Tier 1, I use this much as Tier 2, or in the past, this much as Tier 3, this much as Tier 4. Yeah. And there'd be costs associated with each of those tier allocate or those. that money. It would be recovered for those the commodities at those different tiers would be recovered. Now you'll have just 2 tiers to look at, and
I guess that makes it a little bit easier to read.
it will make it easier to read. Those that are high water users in the valley are going to see a pretty significant increase in their costs, but.
Okay.
That also, one time we're saying that we're trying to reduce the costs to the customers in the valley, but we're also trying to encourage conservation. And one way you can encourage conservation is to discourage high water use any way that you can. So
right.
we're hoping that will have that end effect as well.
Okay. Is there anything in place with that for implementation about conservation?
We used to have a conservation program itself called conservation. That was ended a few years ago, not because there wasn't an interest in conservation, but the Valley had done a really good job of paying attention to conservation in the past. Or we had seen numbers between 20 to 30% reduction compared to a base year of 2013.
Was that around the time when it was like specific days of watering? Watering outdoors or anything like that? Yeah,
that all contributed, and there was a program for a while where we were paying cash for grass, where people could apply for having the cost of having their grass removed, and they would get reimbursed for some of those costs.
Oh,
that was in effect. And we didn't take advantage of that as much as you might have thought. There was a lot of money that was left on the table.
Huh.
So we stalled that program, but that might be something we would look at again in the future.
Okay.
Because obviously Xeriscape is using a lot less water than
much less
lush grass.
See, babe, much less.
So last year, the governor had a executive order that basically said non-functional turf, watering of non-functional turf had to stop. And what they meant by non-functional turf, parks are functional.
Okay.
Medians in the highway are non-functional.
Non-functional. It's just the pretties.
Yeah, it's the stuff you would do just for attraction value. And this didn't apply to residences. This was just for commercial properties.
Okay.
And basically they said, stop. And you might notice around town, we did that. Dr. Mayberry's
yes.
grass in front of his place, folks down here at the mall that's down the street, that grass is yellow now.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, you're right.
So a lot of those responded to that mandate from the state.
Okay.
And we saw a considerable reduction in the water that we were pumping in the water district as a result of that. So it's good news.
I was gonna say that's good, right? I was like, that's a blessing.
It's good to be prudent with water in this valley that doesn't have a normal stream or river flowing in to replace the water that we use.
Or crazy rain every other week.
Crazy rain.
So what are a few of the other fees associated, if you could break those down? When I was getting ready for our episode, just reading through, and it seems like the ready to serve, arsenic compliance and zoning charges are a little confusing for people.
Sure. Let me help or try to help there. So the ready to serve to me is the one that's the most puzzling. Well, what's that?
Yeah.
Because there is there's a program that we, I think, also euphemistically also call Ready to Serve, which is basically the water district's willingness to hook new customers up to the water system.
Okay.
So we have somebody build a new house. They don't have to be concerned that the water district will say, nah, we're not going to give you any water. So our program right now is in line with what the city's plans are for growth.
Okay.
And we try to coordinate between the two because we don't have an infinite supply of water. So
what? You don't have a magic water tree somewhere?
We haven't found it yet. Oh, we're still looking.
Dang.
So there's that ready to serve thing. And then we got a ready to serve on our bill. What the ready to serve on the bill is your share of the costs of actually running the business.
Okay.
So all those things we talked about earlier.
So like staffing, the equipment.
All that stuff, except the only thing that's not in there is the actual water component.
Okay.
And some portions of the delivery, like the electricity for delivering the water, that's part of the water commodity bill.
Okay.
But the pipes and the tanks and the maintenance of all those, and like I say, the staff and the equipment, the trucks,
That's the ready to serve.
all that stuff
On the bill.
divided by the number of customers that we have
Okay.
is basically, trying to remember what it was. I looked at my bill yesterday. It's on the order of like $50, I think, ish, around there. We should all have that same amount on our bill, regardless of how much water we use.
The ready to serve. Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, that was my next question was, is it higher for some or? Nope, same?
No, that should be the same for everybody.
Okay.
I think that's true also for commercial accounts, but I don't know for sure, but I think it is.
Okay. And then arsenic compliance and zoning?
So arsenic compliance, a few years back, the state of California changed the allowable arsenic component in public water systems to be lower than the federal standards. And to meet the state standards, we had to put in these arsenic scrubbers because we didn't believe, well, by federal standards, our water was not unsafe. But by the new state standards, we were in violation. So these arsenic plants had to be put in place.
Okay.
They are only currently scrubbing the well. Say scrubbing. It's probably not the proper technical term. But
we're not too proper around here sometimes.
Not all of the wells are subject to the arsenic treatment. There's just two of them, and they're kind of in the intermediate area. They're off of Mahan and I think between Los Flores and trying to remember the street names.
Oh yeah, the two tanks. Is it Los Flores and?
They're right off of Mahan. There's just big greenish kind of those things. Those are the arsenic scrubbers.
Okay.
And there's a couple of wells in that immediate area where the arsenic levels were detected to be high, so those plants were put in place.
Okay.
And that water gets distributed around the valley, so it's not, you can't say, well, that well is in your backyard. You should be paying to have it scrubbed because that water
it's used everywhere.
It's used basically everywhere. So that's a common fee that we see.
Okay.
The what's the name of the I forget the name of the one.
Zoning?
So the zoning fee, this has to do with the cost of pumping water. So we have an average height of the water in our tanks based on where they were collected. You'll see some tanks off of Bowman Road. You'll see basic large tanks. Those are million-gallon tanks.
I think those ones are the ones I'm most familiar with.
Okay.
So
the average height of the water in our system that has to be pumped to service to our customers. Mm-hmm. If you're up on top of the hill, Cerro Coso, for example, you got to pump. There's a lot more electricity is required to pump the water for users up there than there is, say, for somebody on Balsam Street.
Okay.
So the folks on Balsam Street probably have a very modest zoning charge, but others around the valley, I think we've got 4 zones, and they're basically a couple of 100 feet difference in height, and you can directly show that the cost of that water in that zone would cost more because it had to be pumped up.
Oh, okay.
So it's just adding a fee that reflects.
Well, that makes sense because water probably flows easier to Balsam than it does up to Saracoso.
Absolutely, and from the public standpoint, it makes sense as well. I mean, it helps that you're not subsidizing the cost of delivering water to other customers, right? It's like, well, why should I have to pay to have water pumped up there? So this zoning charge does a good.
Yeah, I'm choosing to live down the hill. Why do I got to pay for them up the hill?
Right.
Yep, I see it.
And you can actually affect. I mean, this would be a bit dramatic, but you actually could affect your water bill by moving to a lower elevation in town. It wouldn't be much, but it would be. You would see it in your bill if you were to do so.
Huh. Interesting. So this implementation, obviously, I was explaining before the show, I finally looked at the actual bill that I had. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming residents are starting to see it on their bills. Is it 100% across the board already implemented?
By now, yes, it should be. Okay. I think everybody should have received a bill based on the new 2-tier structure.
Okay.
By now. I think we were a bit fuzzy on the dates. We had a public hearing at a special board meeting it feels like maybe a month ago,
Okay.
where we allowed folks to come in and say, this is a dumb idea, or, okay, we're in favor. And we had a very small number of people that objected to the rate study, so it approved.
Okay.
It's one of those things, you have a 50% of the population or more disagrees, you can't move forward.
Oh.
So we were well within having the required number of people to support that. Immediately after that, we would have been updating the new bills. And I'm trying to remember how that meeting aligned with the bill cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was I'm pretty sure that was in February.
And then the
maybe
new
mid-February.
bill cycle.
So by April or by March,
they started rolling out.
Yeah.
Okay. So no one needs to be scared like, hey, what's going on? No, but it's out there. And this isn't coming anymore. It should be out there.
Yeah. Well, it's stable for the moment. And I can forecast in the future there will be a need to have another of these rate studies. And there's a number of things that are happening right now that we can see coming that we don't yet know.
Okay.
What the impact on our water bills and the cost of doing business are. For example, there are two. There's a state. There's a Senate bill and there's a House bill in the state right now.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong here. I'll see. See if I got the numbers here. 606. It's a State Bill 606, and then there's a Senate bill. I'll get you the numbers later. It's not really important, but there's two bills in place that have been approved by our current Congress in Sacramento that will affect the indoor water use standards, and it's going to basically going to say you can have 50 gallons of water per person per day. And then it's going to go down to, I think it's 55 now. It'll go down to 50, and then it'll ultimately go to 42 gallons per day over a period of, I think, a phase in of about 10 years.
Huh.
We haven't figured out in the water district how we're going to be the enforcers, right? We have no idea how we would enforce that.
Yeah, because how do I know, or I guess how do you know how many people are living in my home?
I don't. And nor am I going to knock on your door to find out. And you only have 1 meter. So what if you've got a pool in the backyard or you got trees that you're watering?
Mm-hmm.
How am I supposed to separate that out from
what if we have family visiting?
Family visit. It's very complicated. So the state has levied some weird, I should be careful what I say here, but what they've asked us to do are very difficult to put in place and enforce. We just don't have the tools to do that.
This sounds very reminiscent of when I had Councilman Blades on talking about trash.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it wasn't your idea.
No.
But we had a state program that we had to somehow make the best of, and it was difficult.
Every day every week I put out my compost bin and pray that I did the best. I'm like, is this pizza box going to make it?
A couple of other things that we know that are on the horizon. We have a wastewater treatment facility that the city's been working with the Navy for years. It looks like that I think the mayor has mentioned in one of his recent meetings that, by gosh, we're going to start this next year. And
I believe prior to this episode, I was chit-chatting with him, and I think he said by 2026 it should be done.
Which is great, right? Which is great. And he's doing all the things he needs to be ready for that. We can see the roads being torn up and the sewers being repaired. There'll ultimately be a desire, as a matter of fact, there is a desire now to recycle that water.
Okay.
To a level where we can use it for potable use.
Really?
Yeah. That's been thought about and is high on the list of things that we'd like to do as a way to augment the water supply in the valley.
Okay.
They haven't nailed it down exactly 100% we're going to do it, where it's because there's some public concerns about that, and there should be.
Yeah.
But we will be recycling that water.
Okay.
Whether it's for irrigation uses, landscaping uses that the city and the county have, or if it's going to be ultimately used for our consumption. There's going to be costs there. And we don't know what those costs are at the moment.
That would make sense.
So there's other projects like that. There's an imported water project that's being evaluated by Groundwater Authority.
Okay.
Excuse me. That will have costs because that water will be more expensive than the water that we currently mine from the valley.
Because that would include transportation costs, getting it here, another person getting it here.
Right. So there's things on the horizon or in the future that are going to require us to do new rate studies. There'll be more infrastructure costs. There'll be hopefully.
Is there anything that you guys are doing to help offset or reduce costs?
Yeah, thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
There's two that I'd like to bring up. They're kind of notable. You might recall from the past, every so often the fire department or the water district would go around and open up hydrants and flush out the hydrants so that they work because they get rusted up and sometimes sand clogged and things. You don't want those things to be right.
I don't want that to happen ever.
And then there's other maintenance actions that we take that require our pipes to be flushed after you do some repairs. You don't want grit coming out in the faucet when you turn on the.
Yeah. There was a couple years back that happened. Like there was a pipe that burst in the neighborhood I was living in. All of a sudden, I'm going to brush my teeth, and I mean, I'm pretty sure the water was about this color. And I was like,
yeah, that's not very.
I was like, what happened? Apparently, water had been turned back on before it needed to be turned back on. So
we bought a system. It turns out that those flushing activities per year, on average, we're wasting about 8 million gallons of water.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of water. And so somebody came up with an idea, and it's called the No-Dose, DOSE. It's basically a recovery truck, a truck with a big tank.
Okay.
And when you flush these things out, you don't just flush it out in the desert. You capture it back in this tank, and the tank does some filtration and allows us to reuse that water and save 8 million gallons of water a year, which nobody told us we had to do that, but it turned out to be a pretty good idea.
That sounds like a fantastic idea to be able to reuse it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the kids that used to play on the hydrants when they'd open them up on the city streets, they can't do that anymore, but
the way of the world.
And the other thing I'd like to highlight is we invested in solar arrays at near some of our wells. You might notice we have a solar array above the parking structure at the water district as well. That's generating about $60,000 in reduced electricity costs. And that's been going on for about 6 years now. So that's about $3,600.
That's actually significant.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So those help. Those help keep the costs down. And we keep looking for other opportunities like that. In fact, at our last water district workshop, we talked about maybe expanding our solar footprint.
Okay.
These wells use a lot of electricity, and if we could offset the electricity they use during the day by having them hooked up to solar, that would be. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at that, but it is a capital expense, and these larger arrays are not cheap to put in place. So
no, and sometimes it's really hard with like permitting, and it's not a timely project sometimes.
Right. Right.
We know the pains here at Desert Valleys.
Absolutely.
And then one last question I had was, what is the Water Smart program?
So Water Smart is a monitoring system.
Okay.
You might notice that years back, most of the meters in our customers' addresses were updated to be ones that wouldn't require, a meter reader to go out and lift the lid and look in and see the meter. They electronically monitor the use, and they can drive by. The Wi-Fi is up to the truck. Well, actually, it's networked now.
Really?
So the district can, with your permission, can monitor the water through your meter and send you alerts if they see anything unusual, like a slow dripping faucet or a toilet that's leaking.
Or a pipe that broke under your house.
Or a pipe that broke under your house. So I adopted to buy into Water Smart. It was no cost. I signed up for it, and boom. And I didn't hear anything from Water Smart, no big deal. And then all of a sudden I did. And they said, basically it was a text message. And it said, we see an unusual amount of water being used at your address. You might want to check it out. So I did, and I went out. I've got a couple of acres.
Oh, okay.
And this was way out in the South 40, right? I would go out looking around, and there was a spot on the ground that was damp, and I stepped in it, and it was gooey. It had been leaking for quite a while.
Oh, wow.
And or quite a bit of water, I guess is the right way to say it, because it had only been leaking for hours, but it had been leaking a fair amount of water. So I turned off the system, explored the leak, fixed the leak, and turned it back on. And that month, my extra water bill that month was $75.
Huh.
If they hadn't detected and notified me, and let's say it had gone all the way to the next billing cycle before I saw that there was an unusual amount of water being used, I probably would have been looking at thousands of dollars.
That's wild. So how does someone sign up for WaterSmart?
All they have to do is go to the Indian Wells Valley Water District webpage.
Okay.
And look for WaterSmart, and it's basically just say yes, no. You can tell them what the thresholds of your concern are. If you see a drip, 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 or if you see a wild stream of half-inch hose,
okay,
you can tell them, don't just annoy me with the nuisance things, but just the big stuff.
The big concerns.
You can set that up yourself. You can customize that for your tolerance and desire.
I'll make sure to drop a link in that further.
Yeah, please do. It's
I'm going to go set that up and check it out.
We've been trying hard to get the word out on this, and 3 of the directors on my board have signed up. Director Griffin, Director Kaczynski, and myself.
Okay.
All have water, and each one of us has had a notification that kept us from losing a lot of money because there were leaks in our yard. So this is not uncommon.
Interesting.
And
anyone watching, drop us a comment if you're using WaterSmart. I'm interested to see how many people either know about it or utilizing it.
You can be notified. Imagine this: you go on a 2-week vacation, and there's a water leak in your backyard. And I've known some people who have experienced this in the past. WaterSmart can send the notification to your cell phone.
And then
you get a text and you go, oh, and then you can call somebody, right?
To check it out.
Yeah, call a plumber, call Cardinal, call whoever, and have them go out and take a look on your behalf.
So in that case, can people call the water district and see if someone can go out there?
I don't know that the water district might be able to, I don't know.
Okay.
It seems reasonable that they could go out and turn off the meter, but there may be secondary effects by doing so.
Yeah.
That you might not.
I was going to say there might be a bigger problem from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a reasonable question to ask. I just don't know if we've been in the business of doing that in the past. I think that's.
Yeah, because sometimes I think we sometimes take a winter vacation, and if, that pops up, as you turn the pipes, what if the pipes freeze and cause something bigger?
Could be a big problem.
So thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, no problem.
I appreciate all this.
I'm glad. I hope this helps. I rambled a little bit, maybe gave a little bit more detail than necessary, but.
No, I think it's very informative, and it's easier to ask these questions than I know sometimes people going into the meetings. They're like, I feel like I'm expected to know this. Mm-hmm. No, that's what I'm here for, guys. I ask the questions that we don't know what they are.
Well, like I say, I hope it helps clarify things. And if there's a need for a follow-up, or if you have some feedback from the public that they'd like to explore,
yeah, absolutely,
other details and things to get a better feel, let us know, and we'll figure out a way to step up.
Yeah, if you guys have questions, be sure to drop them in, and I can either forward them or we'll bring you back on and have a little Q&A session.
Awesome.
And everyone, have a great rest of your evening. Be sure to head on over to the City of Ridgecrest YouTube page to see this evening's City Council meeting. Bye, guys.